course, Mr. Vinson will be within earshot and will be monitoring everything we say, but nevertheless, I would like to just follow up, if you will, on how long exactly have you been sheriff of this county?
Well, I became a deputy in 1937 under Frank Walden, and then was elected by my full four-year term at 41. I've been sheriff a little over 3 years.
And in your time serving as sheriff or as deputy, would you please share for the gentlemen of the jury and this honorable court and my esteemed colleague, Mr. Vinson, how many murder investigations have you conducted, sir?
This is the first murder that's happened in Boone County during my tenure in public office.
That's quite a commendation on the citizens of Boone County.
It certainly is.
Well, in preparation for your job as sheriff or deputy, did you undergo any sort of training, or was your training more or less on-the-job training?
I guess you would say on-the-job training and common sense.
Common sense. Well, that's certainly something that the citizens of Boone County don't lack, is common sense. Mr. Vinson asked you a lot of questions regarding your investigation of this set of circumstances that took place on August the 17th. And he talked a lot about leads. Isn't it true, Sheriff, that one of the leads that you followed up dealt with the deceased Carl Kiger's affiliation with the Cleveland Syndicate? Isn't that true, sir?
Well, there were circumstances that could have led to speculation, especially the fact that Jenny Kiger advised Joan to go downstairs and get the money that was pinned to the back of the daybed, and there was some $1,440 that she brought upstairs in her hand when at her mother's instructions. Her mother, in fact, said, get the will and get the money and call Uncle Fred.
I see. Well, let's talk about speculation for just a minute, Mr. Williams. $1,400 is an awful lot of money.
That's a year's salary, better for most people.
More than a year's salary for most people. I mean, farming's a honorable profession, but money does not flow freely over the thresholds of most Boone County farmers, I would say. $1,400 is a lot of money. Where do you surmise, where would you speculate that Carl Kiger would get $1,400?
Well, it's not that much for me to speculate, but the Covington police, who did become involved in this, in fact, Detective Bob Teipel showed up, as well as Captain Al Shield from the Covington Police Department. They were there that evening, and I presume, since Bob Mayo Sr. was a Kenton County constable visiting his son next door, that he called everybody he could in Kenton County, including the city manager, Jack Maynard, showed up.
Right.
And so we had a lot of Kenton County people there. Later, after that evening, Kenton County police did advise me they had heard conversation in a Kenton County restaurant that a fellow overheard two men talking, saying, we're not going to pay Carl Kiger any more $1,500 for guarding our slots. We paid him all that we were going to pay him. Now, that was reported to me by Kenton County police. We investigated, they investigated, we found no basis to support nor identification of who those people that said that made that statement were.
I understand, but you did in fact find $1,400 in cash money in that house.
$1,440 in cash money.
Isn't it also true that Carl Kiger, a Kenton County resident, vice mayor of Covington in fact, was visiting Rosegate, which was his summer home? Isn't that true, Sheriff?
That's true. His real residence was on Crescent Avenue in Covington, relatively modest home on Crescent Avenue in Covington.
Sheriff, I would humbly ask you, as someone who knows everybody in the county, how many Boone Countyans have summer homes, much less summer homes that look like Rosegate? My God, it's a mansion.
I have to agree with you on that.
Well, I appreciate your candor, sir. Let's back up and talk about the evening that this incident occurred, and this little girl is now sitting here accused of murder. When you got there, you indicated that you were by far not the first man on the scene, were you?
No, I wasn't. There was several people at that house when Irvin and I got there.
How many would you estimate, Sheriff, had arrived prior to you and Mr. Rouse?
Oh, there was at least three other people there at that moment. This Mr. Hetzel from across the street, and even Lucille Carpenter, she lived across the street, heard the commotion. Shortly after, almost the same time, Lewis Henderson, Grant County Sheriff, and Melvin Huff, the State Highway Patrol, arrived. So we had an assemblage of people.
An assemblage of people. Did you become aware after your arrival, Sheriff, that a group of these Kenton County folks had actually taken this little girl aside and had begun to interrogate her prior to your arrival on the scene? You were aware of that, weren't you, sir?
No, it was after I arrived that Jack Maynard, the city manager, took her aside to her own bedroom and talked with her. But now that was at the request of her uncle, Fred Williamson, who had also arrived. Because Bob Mayo apparently called Fred Williamson her uncle, her mother's brother, and or someone in that Kenton County chain of command had Jack Maynard there, who did take her into her bedroom and questioned her.
Indeed. And wasn't she also questioned by a Mr. Christoffel?
To my knowledge, Mr. Christoffel was a Kenton County detective. To my knowledge, it was only Mr. Maynard to talk to her in that bedroom.
I see. Well, once you did arrive on the scene, you took charge as the law enforcement officer.
I advised everybody that I was in charge. This case was in Boone County, and I was giving the instructions. And most of the people were cooperative, but there was more people there than Irvin and I could almost handle.
I see. I see. You had the opportunity to observe this little girl during the time that you were there that evening and afterwards, Sheriff. Did you yourself draw any conclusions about her demeanor? I know you said that she appeared to be nervous. I mean, my goodness, wouldn't you be under the circumstances?
I'd be more than nervous, Mr. Smith.
Absolutely. Well, didn't you in fact give an interview to a local paper which stated that in your interaction with this little girl that you found her to be, well, I think to use your own words, raised right. Didn't you say that, Sheriff?
While she was taken into custody, she was a very well-behaved young woman. When we met with Judge Cropper, who advised, as the juvenile judge, that she be placed in Elmer Kirkpatrick in the jail, but in the jailer's residence, not in a cell.
I see.
And Mr. Kirkpatrick and I and everyone agreed that she was very well-behaved during her period of incarceration in our Boone County jail.
And in your words, appeared to be raised right.
Yes, sir. I take no exception to that.
Good. Thank you, Sheriff, very much. And throughout the course of your investigation, you had the opportunity to interview teachers and friends and parents of friends, and did they all not, in unanimity, state that Joan Kiger herself was a model young lady? As a matter of fact, many parents expressed that they wished their own children would emulate her, didn't they, Sheriff?
As witnesses previously have testified from this very chair, that's an accurate statement.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. At this time, I have no further questions for this witness.
Please react, Mr. Benson.
Yes, Your Honor, very briefly.
In spite of what you heard about how well-mannered she was, how calm and collected she was, did any of that change your mind at all?
Not
She
one
was a
iota.
murderer.
Not one iota.
Thank you. That's all, Your Honor, for this witness.
Please step down.
Mr. Benson, do you have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor, that is the case for the Commonwealth, sir.
Thank you. Smith.
May it please the court at this time, I would like to make my opening statement. Gentlemen of the jury, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your service here in this Boone County Circuit Court as you have begun to hear the evidence that the state has presented against this little girl, Joan Kiger. The Commonwealth has in fact rested. They have proffered all the evidence that they can muster against her. And as good, commonsensical Boone County residents, I would submit to you, gentle friends, that you did not leave your common sense at the threshold of the door when you entered this venerable room. You've heard the case that they have to present, and now you're going to have the opportunity to hear the other side of the story, if you will. Because as we all know, every story has two sides, just as every coin has two sides. I would ask that you keep an open mind from this point on as you hear the evidence that we shall present. Evidence that is in fact the truth of the matter. Evidence will show, and you will hear, you will come to understand that it is true that this little girl, in fact, on the fateful evening of August the 16th, 1943, did in fact shoot and kill the people in her house that we have heretofore been speaking of. Most notably, in the case that you're hearing today, her brother, Jerry Jerome Kiger, 6 years old. But you will hear as part of our case in chief, if you will, that Joan, much like her father before her, suffers from a malady that we can scarcely imagine. She suffers from night terrors. Now, I know you're sitting there and wondering, what in the hell is a night terror? Well, it's something, as I say, that we can scarcely imagine. But you will hear evidence through the testimony of expert witnesses, psychiatrists from Lexington, who will tell you in graphic detail that on this fateful night, Joan Kiger was in a somnambulistic state, a state which borders between being awake and being totally asleep, in which she is not conscious of her actions. And it was in that state that she was gripped by this night terror, which caused her to believe, and believe beyond any reality that we can imagine, as real as this scene that you're depicting right now, that she was in danger. Her family was in danger. Their home had been burglarized. Her father was being choked. Her brother was under attack. Her mother was under attack. And the only option that she had, was to defend her life, her family's life, and their property at the point of the gun. Who among us would not do the same? You will hear testimony, gentle friends, from teachers, 16 years old, going to be graduating from a prestigious private academy, La Salette, at 16, a model student, a model girl. You will hear evidence that aside from anything that you might believe about the relationship that Joan had with her father, that there's nothing besides hell itself that could compel her to ever harm a hair on her brother Jerry Kiger's head. You will hear evidence, as you all have already heard some alluded to, that this night terror condition was exacerbated by the fact that Carl Kiger himself had an abnormal paranoia of a home burglary, that someone would be after him. And because of his curious affiliation with people from Kenton County, and we all know what goes on in Kenton County, it was a reasonable conclusion to think that someone might try to burglarize their home. You will hear evidence to all of this, and the only thing that I ask, and I know I'm being repetitive, gentlemen, the only thing that I ask is that you maintain an open mind. You listen to the other side of the story, the flip side of the coin, if you will. And when this is all said and done, I'll submit to you that there is only one reasonable conclusion that we can all reach. Thank you very much. Mr. Vincent, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Smith, do you have any witnesses to call at this time?
At this time, the defense calls Joan Kiger to the stand.
Bailiff, this Kenton County reporter, one more time, and he's to be removed.
You need to step back behind the rail, sir. Ms. Kiger, will you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
Joan Kiger.
Please be seated.
Good afternoon, Joan. I'm going to be asking you some questions. If at any time you don't understand a question or you need just a minute, just stop me and I'll try to rephrase and make myself more clear. Or if you just need a minute to collect yourself, I realize that this is difficult, as does everyone here today. If you would please tell the gentlemen of the jury in this honorable court and my esteemed colleague, Mr. Vincent, what took place in your life on August the 16th, 1943?
It was a normal day. I came home that day from my friend May's house, and I stayed inside. My mama, daddy, and Jerry picked tomatoes, and after they went to bed, I stayed up late and listened to the serenade on the radio, and then I went to bed.
You went to bed.
Could you speak up? I'm having trouble.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Joan, if you would, describe for this court the relationship that you had with your family, with your father and brother specifically, if you would.
We were a very close family. I loved my daddy, and my little brother was so sweet. It was fun to take care of him.
How much younger was Jerry than you?
About 10 years.
About 10 years. So he was essentially the caboose of the family, wasn't he?
The baby.
The baby. And you have two older brothers, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And where are they currently? Or where had they been at that point? Excuse me. I know today they're among us in the gallery.
They're
But where
both
had
in the
they?
military.
They're both in the military, serving in World War II.
In the war.
Tell us about school. Are you a good student?
Very good student. I have very good grades.
You like school?
Yes, sir.
How do you get along with your teachers? Do they like you as well as you like school?
I believe so.
That's good. Well, Joan, I know it's difficult, but we have to address the reason why we're all here in this court today. And that's that sometime in the early morning hours of August the 17th, 1943, something happened that caused you to act completely out of character.
Object, Your Honor, that's a conclusion he doesn't need to draw. I don't know about her character. That's what's on trial here.
Your Honor, I respect Mr. Vincent's point of view, but nevertheless, I think the totality of the circumstances needs to be considered as these gentlemen hold her life in the balance, and the fact that she is an upstanding young lady, a good student, and a child that any parent would love to have, is
Your Honor, I
definitely hard
withdraw
work.
the objection. I didn't intend to have a speech from erstwhile counsel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Benson. On that evening, you listened to your radio program and you went to bed. And then what happened?
I heard my mom screaming, so I got out of bed and I ran downstairs to get the 2 guns that Daddy keeps in a box.
You heard your mother scream, you went downstairs to retrieve the guns. Why did you automatically assume that you needed a gun because you heard your mother scream?
Daddy's always told us that people could break into our house.
And to that end, here it is August, and in fact, all the windows were closed, the doors were shut and locked. So your father had instilled in you from a young age that burglary or home invasion was a real possibility, didn't he, Jen?
Yes, he was very afraid that our house would be broken into.
So you hear your mother scream, you go and get the guns. Then what happened?
As I came up to the landing, I saw somebody in my mom and Daddy's room,
You
and
saw,
they started shooting at me.
the person you saw in your parents' room actually fired a weapon at you.
Yes, sir.
Could you see this person clearly?
No, sir.
It was a shadowy, hazy figure.
Yes.
But you could make out that he was wrestling with your father?
Yes. And I shot back. I tried the first gun, and I couldn't pull the trigger. So I had the second gun, and I shot back at him.
And then what did you do?
I saw him on top of my daddy, and I know my daddy sleeps with the gun underneath his pillow. So I ran over and grabbed his gun, and I shot at the man.
I see. Did the man shoot back again, or did he flee the room, or what
He
happened?
left the room.
Left the room. And where did he go?
I wasn't sure. My mama said she heard Jerry crying, so I should go check on him. And then I saw the man in his room, so I shot at him again.
I see. Well, that had to be very terrifying.
Yes, sir.
Can you describe, if at all possible, the feelings that you were having at this particular point in time?
I couldn't believe it was happening. I was scared to death.
Absolutely petrified, I'm sure. Well, John, let me ask you, I've asked you about the relationship with your father and your teachers and your friends. Had you had any sort of argument or any sort of a disagreement at all prior to this evening with either of your parents, but more specifically your father?
No, sir. We had had a great day. I just got home and barely spoke to him that day.
I see. And certainly there was no animosity between you and your brother, was there?
No.
I understand. Joan, is there anything that you would like to tell the gentlemen of this jury and this honorable court about what happened on that fateful day that we haven't covered?
I object, Your Honor. The next thing we're going to hear out of her is that her mother talked about nightmares or something. Got to get this into evidence. I've just been sitting here waiting on it. I object to this, sir.
Your Honor, if the Commonwealth will please bear with me, we are in fact laying the very foundation of our case. I'll only take a few minutes along this line.
Overruled, Dad.
My mama did ask me if I was having a nightmare.
Is that what she asked you?
My daddy has nightmares, and I've had them too for a while.
I see. As a matter of fact, I believe that prior testimony of your mother was that you had been experiencing these nightmares on a frequent basis since you had transitioned from childhood into womanhood. Isn't that correct, Joan?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Joan.